Claire sat in her high-rise office overlooking the bustling streets of New York City, the sun casting a warm glow through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The space was a testament to her success. Sleek furniture, modern art adorning the walls, and a large mahogany desk cluttered with contracts and reports. Dressed in a tailored navy suit, she exuded confidence as she reviewed the final terms of a significant deal that would expand her company's footprint in the tech industry. "Claire, you've got to see this," called out her assistant Sarah, bursting through the door with a bright smile. "The investors are thrilled with the presentation. They're ready to sign." "Perfect," Claire replied, her voice steady but laced with the urgency of her relentless ambition. She looked up from her paperwork, her blue eyes sharp and focused. "Let's finalize everything before lunch. I want to make sure they feel valued and excited." As Sarah nodded and left the room, Claire leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a rare moment of satisfaction. She was at the top of her game, the youngest CEO in her industry, and she had worked tirelessly to get there. The sacrifices she made, her social life, her health, even her family, were worth it. Or so she told herself. Yet, deep down, a nagging emptiness flickered in the back of her mind, a feeling she had learned to push away with each achievement. Meanwhile, several miles away in Central Park, Jack rummaged through a trash can, his hands dirty and calloused from days spent on the streets. The sun was harsh against his skin, but he had grown accustomed to the discomfort. With a weathered backpack slung over his shoulder, he scavenged for anything that could sustain him. A half-eaten sandwich caught his eye, and he gingerly pulled it out, inspecting it for any signs of mold. His stomach growled, a constant reminder of the hunger that gnawed at him. "Hey, buddy, you're not going to eat that, are you?" a passerby called out, a man in a crisp suit and sunglasses, clearly oblivious to Jack's plight. Jack looked up, his face expressionless, but inside he felt a pang of humiliation. "Just trying to survive, same as you," he muttered, his voice barely rising above the noise of the park. The man scoffed and walked away, leaving Jack to his thoughts. Life on the streets had taught him many lessons, but the most profound was how quickly people could judge one another without knowing the whole story. He settled down on a bench, taking a moment to reflect. The park was alive with the sounds of laughter, children playing, and couples strolling hand in hand. Jack watched them with a mix of longing and resignation. Once, he had dreams too, of writing, of living a life filled with purpose. But life had dealt him a hard hand, and now he was just a shadow of his former self, navigating the unforgiving streets of an unforgiving city. As he sat there, he couldn't help but think about the disparities around him. The wealthy elite, like the woman he had seen in the high-rise office, seemed to live in a different world altogether. They moved through life with an air of entitlement, while he fought daily for mere survival. Yet Jack had learned to find beauty in small things, a warm breeze, a kind word from a stranger, or the way the sunlight danced on the leaves. These moments were his treasures, and he clung to them desperately. At that very moment, Claire was seated in a high-end restaurant, the atmosphere buzzing with chatter and laughter as she dined with her colleagues. The table was adorned with elegant dishes and fine wine, a stark contrast to Jack's reality. She leaned back in her chair, engaged in a heated discussion about the future of their company. "I'm telling you, the merger is going to elevate us to the next level," Claire asserted confidently, her voice commanding the attention of the table. "We need to take risks if we want to stay ahead of the competition." Her colleagues nodded, some taking notes, others exchanging glances filled with admiration. Claire was a force to be reckoned with, and she thrived on the energy of the room. Yet beneath her composed exterior, an undercurrent of stress bubbled just below the surface. The pressure to perform, to maintain her reputation, weighed heavily on her. Suddenly, without warning, Claire clutched her chest, her breath catching in her throat. The world around her blurred, voices fading into a distant hum as panic surged through her. She could feel her heart racing uncontrollably, and then darkness began to close in. The last thing she remembered before collapsing was the sound of her colleagues gasping in shock. "Claire!" someone shouted, but their voice felt far away. It was as if she were submerged in water, the chaos of the restaurant muffled and distorted. Jack, who had just wandered into the restaurant's vicinity, caught sight of the commotion. He instinctively moved closer, drawn by the urgency of the situation. As he approached, he could see Claire lying on the floor, her colleagues crowding around her, their faces etched with worry. "Call 911!" someone yelled, their voice slicing through the tension. Jack's heart raced as he knelt beside her, taking in the scene. He had witnessed many crises in his life, but this felt different. Without hesitation, he took charge. "Move aside, give her some space," he instructed, his voice steady despite the chaos. He had never been trained in CPR, but instinct kicked in. He remembered bits and pieces from the survival lessons he had learned in his youth. With careful determination, he placed his hands on Claire's chest, feeling the rhythm of life pulsing beneath his palms. "Come on, lady. You've got to fight," he murmured softly as he began the compressions. The restaurant was filled with gasps and hushed whispers, eyes wide with disbelief at the unlikely hero. "Is anyone here a doctor?" someone shouted, but Jack kept his focus, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He counted in his head, pushing away the distractions, the doubts that whispered in the corners of his mind. With every beat, Jack felt a strange connection to this woman he had never met. She was rich and powerful, yet here she was, vulnerable and in need of help. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, hoping his words could somehow reach her in the darkness. Time felt surreal as he continued, the world around him blurring into an amalgam of frantic energy. He could hear the distant wail of sirens approaching, but all that mattered was the life beneath his hands, the hope that surged within him. He poured every ounce of his being into those compressions, willing her to wake up, to fight back against the darkness that threatened to claim her. And then, just as the sirens grew louder, Claire gasped, her eyes fluttering open, bewildered and lost. Jack withdrew his hands, watching as the paramedics rushed in, taking over the scene. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and in that instant, an unspoken bond formed, a connection born of crisis and survival, one that neither of them could fully understand just yet. Claire lay motionless on the hospital bed, her heart still racing from the sudden collapse that had sent her spiraling into unconsciousness. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the faint hum of machines that monitored her vital signs. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting soft lines across her face, but she remained unaware of the world around her. It was only when the doctor entered the room, clipboard in hand, that she began to stir. "Ms. Bennett," he said, gently shaking her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Claire's eyelids fluttered open, revealing her striking blue eyes, now clouded with confusion. "What? What happened?" she croaked, her throat dry as sandpaper. "You collapsed at the restaurant," the doctor explained, his voice calm and reassuring. "You're stable now, but we need to monitor you for a while." Panic surged through Claire as she recalled the scene, the laughter of her colleagues, the exquisite meal, and then the jarring moment when everything went black. "Was anyone hurt?" she asked, her brow furrowing with concern. "Just you, but you're going to be all right," the doctor reassured her. "You had a panic attack, likely triggered by stress. It's not uncommon given your lifestyle." As he spoke, Claire's mind drifted. She thought of the high expectations she placed on herself, the endless meetings, the pressure to succeed. But there was something else nagging at her, a lingering sense of gratitude. "What about the man who helped me?" she asked. her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor paused for a moment, his expression shifting slightly. "Ah, yes. A homeless man named Jack. He was nearby and performed CPR until the paramedics arrived. You owe your life to him." Claire's heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth. In that moment, she felt a connection to someone she had never met, a stranger whose actions had changed everything. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "Let's focus on your recovery first," the doctor advised gently. "You'll have plenty of time to express your gratitude later." Meanwhile, in the hospital waiting area, Jack paced nervously, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn jacket. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the streets he called home. He felt out of place, like a ghost haunting a world that didn't want him. The minutes stretched into hours as he waited for news, anxiety weighing heavily on his shoulders. "Excuse me," a nurse said, approaching him with a clipboard. "Are you here for Claire Bennett?" Jack nodded, his heart racing at the mention of her name. "Is she okay?" "She's stable," the nurse assured him. "The doctors are monitoring her, but she's awake now. You can see her shortly." "Thank you," Jack replied, relief flooding through him. He leaned against the wall, taking a few deep breaths to calm the tempest of emotions swirling inside him. He had never expected to find himself in this situation, saving the life of a woman who lived in a world so far removed from his own. When the nurse finally led him to Claire's room, Jack hesitated at the threshold. She looked so small in the oversized hospital bed, her face pale but serene. As he stepped inside, Claire's eyes lit up with recognition. "Jack," she said softly, her voice a gentle melody against the clinical backdrop. "You came." "I had to," he replied, his voice rough from disuse. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." Claire studied him, taking in his disheveled hair and the faint stubble on his jaw. There was a rawness to him that contrasted sharply with the polished world she inhabited. "You saved my life," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you." Jack shrugged, a faint blush creeping across his cheeks. "It's what anyone would have done. I just acted." "No, it's more than that," Claire insisted, her gaze unwavering. "You didn't have to help me. You chose to." As they locked eyes, an unspoken bond began to form between them. Claire felt a surge of gratitude, and Jack sensed the weight of her vulnerability. It was a strange moment, two lives so different, yet connected by fate. Do you have a place to stay?" Claire asked, concern creeping into her voice. "I'm fine," Jack replied, though the lie felt heavy on his tongue. "I have a spot in the park." Claire's heart ached at the thought. "That's not fine. You shouldn't have to live like that." Jack shifted uncomfortably, the weight of her concern pressing down on him. "It's just how it is. I've learned to make do." Claire shook her head, frustration bubbling up inside her. "No one should have to make do when there are options available. I want to help you, Jack." He looked at her, skepticism mingling with intrigue. "Help? How?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, her brow furrowing as she considered the possibilities. "But I want to do something. You deserve better than this." Jack was taken aback by her sincerity. "You don't even know me," he said, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity evident in his tone. "I know you saved my life," Claire countered, her eyes shimmering with determination, "and I want to repay that kindness." As their conversation continued, Claire learned more about Jack's life, his dreams, his struggles, and the series of unfortunate events that led him to the streets. Each revelation painted a vivid picture of resilience and hardship, one that was starkly different from her own experiences. "Sometimes it feels like the world has forgotten me," Jack confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Like I'm invisible. Claire felt a pang of empathy. I can't imagine what that must be like. My life is so different. But I want to understand. I want to see you, not just the circumstances. Jack met her gaze, his skepticism giving way to a flicker of hope. Why do you care? Because I believe everyone deserves a chance, Claire said, her conviction evident. And you deserve more than just survival. You deserve to thrive. As their conversation drew to a close, Claire felt a sense of purpose igniting within her. She would find a way to help Jack, to bridge the chasm between their worlds. And in that moment, she realized that their paths had crossed for a reason she was determined to uncover. Claire sat behind her polished mahogany desk, the skyline of New York City sprawled out behind her in a breathtaking panorama. The office was a reflection of her success, gleaming glass walls, contemporary art pieces, and a meticulously organized space that mirrored her meticulous mind. Yet, despite her accomplishments, a peculiar emptiness lingered in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, but that thought was quickly dismissed as she focused on her laptop, where the numbers from her latest deal danced across the screen. Suddenly, her phone buzzed, interrupting her train of thought. It was a message from her assistant, Kelly. "Jack is here. Are you ready?" Claire took a moment to collect herself. Today was not just another day. It was the day she had invited Jack, the man who had saved her life, to her office. He was a stranger to her world, a world of tailored suits and high-stakes negotiations, and she wondered how he would fit into it. "Send him in," she replied, her heart racing slightly at the prospect of meeting him again. The door opened slowly, and Jack stepped in. He looked out of place in her luxurious office, his clothes worn and frayed, his hair unkempt. But there was a spark in his blue eyes that caught Claire off guard. He held his head high, exuding a quiet strength that spoke volumes about his character. "Hey, Claire," he said, his voice steady but low. "Thanks for inviting me." "Thank you for coming, Jack," Claire replied, standing up to greet him. "I know this might feel a bit overwhelming." Jack shifted uncomfortably, glancing around the room. "Yeah, it's different. But I'm here." Claire gestured for him to sit. "I wanted to talk about how I can help you get back on your feet. I know you mentioned wanting to become a writer. I think you have potential, and I'd like to help you pursue that." Jack looked at her, skepticism etched across his face. "You really want to help me? I mean, you don't even know me." "I know enough," Claire replied, her tone firm yet compassionate. "You saved my life. That counts for something, doesn't it?" He folded his hands in his lap, his mind racing with thoughts of disbelief and gratitude. "I appreciate that, but I'm not sure where to start. I don't have any experience or connections." Claire leaned forward, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You start by writing. We can work on your ideas together. I can help you refine them, maybe even get them published. But first, let's talk about what you want to write about." Jack hesitated, the weight of her offer settling heavily on his shoulders. "I've always wanted to write about life on the streets, you know? The things people don't see or understand. But I don't know if anyone would care about that." "Of course they would," Claire replied, her voice unwavering. "Your experiences are valuable. They're real. People want to hear the truth. You have a unique perspective that could resonate with so many." He met her gaze, searching for insincerity but finding none. "You really think so?" "I know so. Let's brainstorm some ideas. What's the first thing that comes to mind?" Jack took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his chest ease ever so slightly. I guess, the moments of kindness I've seen, like when someone gives me a sandwich or just stops to talk. Those moments remind me that there's still good out there." Claire smiled, pleased. "That's beautiful. The world needs more of that. Let's capture those stories. You could write a series of vignettes, real-life encounters that reveal the humanity in both the giver and the receiver." As they continued to talk, Jack found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. The walls he had built around himself began to crumble, and he shared stories of his life on the streets, the friendships he had formed, and the struggles he faced daily. Claire listened intently, her heart aching for the man sitting before her. "Sometimes, people just walk by without even looking. It's like I'm invisible," Jack said, his voice tinged with sadness. "But then there are those rare moments when someone really sees me. It makes all the difference." Claire nodded, her mind racing with ideas. "We could structure your writing to highlight those moments. We'll create a narrative that challenges perceptions and opens people's eyes to the realities of homelessness." Jack smiled, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. "I'd like that. I've always wanted to tell these stories, but I never thought I could actually do it." "Of course you can," Claire encouraged. "You just need a little guidance, and I'm here to help." As their conversation flowed, Claire felt an unexpected warmth bloom within her. She was helping someone, truly helping. It was a refreshing change from the cutthroat dealings of her corporate life, and she realized how much she craved this connection. Just as they were lost in their discussion, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message that sent a chill down her spine. It was from her business partner, Mark. "We need to talk. There's something happening that you need to know about." "Excuse me for a moment," Claire said, standing up and stepping away to take the call. She pressed her phone to her ear, trying to mask her growing anxiety. "Claire, we've got a situation. There are rumors circulating about our company, and I think someone is trying to sabotage us," Mark said, his voice grave. "What do you mean? Sabotage? Who?" Claire demanded, her heart racing. "I don't know, but I've heard whispers of a leak. We need to figure this out fast." As she hung up, Claire felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She returned to Jack, who was looking at her with concern. "Is everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Not really," she admitted, shaking her head. "There are problems at work. I need to figure out who's behind this before it spirals out of control." Jack sensed the shift in her demeanor, the way her vibrant energy dimmed. "Do you want to talk about it? Maybe I can help." Claire smiled softly, appreciating the gesture. "Thank you, Jack. I'm not sure how, but I'll keep it in mind. Right now, I need to focus on this." "Sure, I get it. Just know I'm here if you need me," he said, his sincerity palpable. As they continued to sit together, Claire felt the tension of her business troubles begin to mix with the hope she had found in Jack. She had started this day wanting to help him, but now she realized that the lines between their struggles were beginning to blur. They were both fighting battles, hers in the boardroom and his on the streets, and perhaps together they could find a way to confront their demons head-on. Little did they know, the challenges ahead would test both of them in ways they could never have anticipated. Claire sat at her sleek, glass-topped desk, sunlight streaming through the expansive windows that overlooked the bustling streets of New York City. The soft hum of the city outside contrasted sharply with the rapid tapping of her fingers on the keyboard. She had been working on the collaborative writing project with Jack for several weeks now, and for the first time in ages, she felt a spark of creativity igniting within her. Jack's raw perspective on life had infused her writing with an authenticity she hadn't realized was missing. "Are you ready for this?" Claire asked, glancing up as Jack entered her office, a hesitant smile crossing his face. He wore a clean but ill-fitting shirt, a vast improvement from the worn clothes she had seen him in the first time they met. Still, the transformation was not only physical, it was evident in the way he held himself, a newfound confidence radiating from his very presence. "Yeah, I think so," Jack replied, running a hand through his unruly hair. "I've been thinking about what I want to say." Claire motioned for him to sit across from her. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he fidgeted with the edge of the paper in front of him. "Let's just talk it out. You don't have to have everything figured out right now." Jack nodded, his eyes darting around the office, taking in the framed awards and accolades that adorned the walls. "It's just, your life is so different from mine. I'm not sure my story matters." "Jack," Claire began, leaning forward, "your story is incredibly important. It's real, it's raw, and it's something that can resonate with so many people. That's why we're working on this together. I want to help you share your voice." In that moment, Jack felt a flicker of hope. Claire's belief in him made him feel valued, something he hadn't experienced in a long time. "Okay," he said, his voice steadier now. "I've been thinking about how I got to where I am. Growing up, I always thought I'd be a writer. I loved stories, but life took a turn, you know." Claire smiled softly as she encouraged him. "Tell me about it. Start from the beginning." Jack took a deep breath, his mind racing back to his childhood. "I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. My parents worked hard, but we didn't have much. I remember finding solace in books. They were my escape. I dreamed of being a published author, but..." His voice trailed off, and Claire could see the weight of his memories pressing down on him. "But what?" Claire prodded gently. "But then, life happened. I lost my parents when I was 16. Everything changed. I had to fend for myself, and writing just felt like a luxury I couldn't afford anymore," he confessed, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Claire felt a pang of empathy. She reached across the desk, placing her hand over his. "I'm so sorry, Jack. It's incredible how you've fought through so much. That resilience is something you should be proud of." Jack looked up, surprised by her sincerity. "You really think so?" "I know so, and that's why your story matters. It's not just about the struggles, it's about how you've persevered. You have a voice, and I want to help you amplify it." As they continued to brainstorm ideas, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. The project was transforming into more than just a writing assignment. It was becoming a shared journey of healing and self-discovery for both of them. They bounced ideas back and forth, intertwining their lives through their words, creating a narrative that held the potential to inspire others. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting a warm glow through the office. Claire glanced at her watch, realizing the time had slipped away. "I think we have a solid outline here," she said, a sense of accomplishment washing over her. "Let's take a break and revisit it tomorrow." Jack nodded, a smile breaking across his face. "I can't believe we did this. It feels good." "Good," Claire replied, her heart swelling with pride for him. "But remember, this is just the beginning. We'll keep working on it together." As Jack left her office that day, Claire felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was not just helping someone else, she was rediscovering her own passion for storytelling. However, as the days went by, Claire's business troubles began to escalate. The sabotage that had initially seemed like a distant threat crept closer, darkening her world. It started with small, irritating setbacks, miscommunications, lost contracts, but slowly morphed into something more sinister. One evening, while reviewing documents in her office, Claire received a call from her business partner, Tom. His voice was tight with tension. "Claire, we need to talk. There's a problem with the investors." "What do you mean?" Claire's heart raced. What kind of problem? There have been rumors circulating. Someone's been spreading lies about our financials. We could lose everything if we don't get ahead of this, Tom replied, his voice low. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. Who is doing this? I don't know yet, but we need to act fast. I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow morning, he said before hanging up abruptly. Staring at her phone, Claire felt a mixture of anger and anxiety. She knew the stakes were high, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone from within her own company was behind it. Her instincts screamed that Tom was not being entirely truthful with her. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office early, determined to confront Tom. She found him in the conference room, pacing back and forth, his brow furrowed with worry. "Tom, we need to talk," Claire said, her voice firm. He stopped, looking at her with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "About what?" "I need to know who's trying to sabotage us. This isn't just a rumor, it's affecting our reputation and our bottom line." Tom hesitated, his eyes darting away. "I don't think it's anyone from the inside. It could just be a competitor trying to shake us up." "Don't give me that," Claire shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You know this isn't just a coincidence. I need transparency, Tom. If I'm going to fix this mess, I need to know the truth." His expression hardened. "I'm doing everything I can, Claire. You need to trust me." "Trust is earned, Tom," she replied, her voice steady despite the tumult of emotions within her. "And right now, I'm not feeling very secure in our partnership." As they parted ways, Claire's mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was hiding something. She felt overwhelmed, her instincts urging her to dig deeper. That evening, she met Jack at their usual spot in the park, eager to share her concerns. She found him sitting on the same bench, a notebook in his lap, scribbling furiously. "Hey, how's the writing going?" Claire asked, sliding onto the bench beside him. Jack looked up, a spark of enthusiasm in his eyes. "It's going well. I've been thinking about how to weave in some of my experiences with the themes of resilience and hope. It feels good to write again." Claire smiled, feeling buoyed by his energy. "That's amazing, Jack. I want to hear all about it. But first, I need to talk to you about something." Jack's expression shifted, concern etching itself into his features. "What's wrong?" Claire took a deep breath, weighing her words. "I think there's someone sabotaging my business. I spoke with Tom today, and I'm starting to suspect he might be involved." Jack's brows furrowed. "Involved how?" "Someone knows things about our financials, and it's making the investors nervous. I can't shake the feeling that this is coming from within our own team," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. Jack leaned in closer, his expression serious. "You need to find out the truth. If Tom is involved, you can't trust him. You have to protect yourself and your company." Claire nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I know. That's why I want to enlist your help. You have a different perspective, and I think we could work together to figure this out." Jack's eyes widened in surprise. "You want me to help you investigate your business?" "Yes, I need someone I can trust, and you've shown me that you think outside the box. We can dig deeper together," Claire urged, her heart racing at the thought of their unlikely partnership. "Okay," Jack finally said, determination shining in his eyes. "Let's do it. We'll find out what's really going on." As they sat together, plotting their next steps, Claire felt a surge of hope. Despite the challenges ahead, she sensed that this collaboration was forging a bond between them that transcended their different worlds. Together, they would face the unknown, united by trust and the shared goal of uncovering the truth. The rain drizzled down lightly, casting a glistening sheen on the streets of New York City as Claire and Jack sat in her sleek office overlooking the bustling skyline. They had spent the last few days sifting through documents and piecing together clues that pointed to the deception lurking within the walls of Claire's company. The atmosphere was thick with tension as they shared an unspoken understanding that they were delving into dangerous territory. "Look at this," Claire said, her voice steady despite the unease swirling within her. She leaned over the stack of papers on her mahogany desk, her manicured finger tracing a particular line in the contract. "These numbers don't add up. If we follow the money trail, it leads straight to more industries." Jack furrowed his brow, his expression a mixture of concern and determination. He had never been involved in anything like this before, but the stakes felt personal. "More industries? Isn't that the company that's been trying to acquire yours?" Claire nodded, her blue eyes narrowing as she processed the implications. "Exactly. They've been undercutting us for months. Now I'm starting to think my partner, Greg, is in on it. The way he brushed off my concerns last week, I should have known something was off." Jack leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair, lost in thought. "You think he's playing both sides? That's a risky game. If he gets caught..." "He'll take me down with him," Claire finished for him, her voice low. "That's why we need to gather more evidence. I can't confront him without something solid to back me up." Jack nodded, his expression turning serious. "We need to be careful. If they realize we're onto them, they might retaliate. I've seen what desperation can do to people." As if on cue, Claire's phone buzzed violently on the desk, startling them both. She glanced at the screen, and her heart sank. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Claire!" A gravelly voice spoke on the other end, sending a chill down her spine. "You need to back off. This is your only warning." "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice trembling slightly. Jack leaned in closer, concern etched on his face. "Someone who knows you're poking your nose where it doesn't belong. You don't want to end up like the last person who challenged us." The line went dead, leaving Claire staring at her phone in disbelief. "What was that about?" Jack asked quietly, his eyes searching hers. "Just a threat," Claire replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But they don't scare me. If I back down now, I'll lose everything." Jack reached across the desk, his rough hand covering hers. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together." She appreciated his support, yet the weight of the looming threats felt heavier than ever. "We have to be smart," she said, pulling her hand away reluctantly. "I can't afford to make any mistakes." The days that followed were a blur of late nights and whispered conversations, each moment strained with the fear of being discovered. They remained vigilant, piecing together the web of deceit that surrounded Claire's partner. Jack's instincts kicked in as they navigated the murky waters of corporate betrayal, his past experiences on the streets granting him a unique perspective on survival. One evening, as they sifted through more documents in Claire's office, Jack's expression shifted. "I think I recognize this name," he said, pointing to a signature on one of the contracts. "Lila Sanderson. She works for Moore Industries. I've seen her around the park before." Claire's curiosity piqued. She leaned closer to examine the name. "What do you know about her?" Jack hesitated, his mind racing back to the days when he had lived on the fringes of society. "She's ruthless. I remember her from when I was trying to gather enough money to eat. She'd strut around like she owned the place, looking down at anyone who wasn't in her social circle. If she's involved, it could be bad news." "Then we need to find out more about her," Claire said, determination glinting in her eyes. "If she's working with Greg, that could tie everything together." But just as they were formulating a plan, Claire's phone buzzed again, this time with a text message. She opened it, her heart racing as she read the words, "Stop digging or else." "This is getting serious," Jack said, his voice low. "We need to be cautious." Claire swallowed hard, fear gnawing at her insides. "I won't let them intimidate me," she declared fiercely. "I have too much at stake." With Jack's help, they devised a strategy to gather more evidence. They would attend an upcoming industry gala where both Greg and Lila would be present. It was risky, but it was their best chance to overhear something incriminating. On the night of the gala, Claire donned an elegant black dress that hugged her figure, her confidence bolstered by Jack's presence by her side. He wore a simple yet clean outfit that made him appear more polished than usual, an attempt to blend into the elite crowd. Despite the glitz and glamour surrounding them, Jack felt out of place, but he pushed those feelings aside. Tonight was about survival. As they mingled among the elite, Claire scanned the crowd for Greg and Lila. "There's Greg," she whispered to Jack, nodding toward a group of well-dressed men. "Let's see if we can get close enough to hear them." Jack's heart raced as they approached the group, his instincts on high alert. The laughter and clinking of glasses surrounded them, but he focused on the conversation ahead. "I heard the deal is almost finalized," Greg said, a smirk on his face. "Once we get rid of Claire, it'll be a piece of cake." Jack's blood ran cold. "We need to move," he murmured to Claire. But before they could retreat, Greg caught sight of them. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his demeanor shifting instantly from jovial to hostile. "This isn't a place for charity cases." Claire's chin lifted defiantly. "I could say the same about you. How does it feel to be a backstabber?" Gasps rippled through the crowd as Jack stepped forward, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you can threaten her and get away with it?" Greg's expression hardened, but before he could respond, Lila appeared at his side, her eyes narrowing as she assessed the situation. "What's this? A little confrontation?" she taunted, her voice dripping with disdain. Jack could feel the tension crackling in the air as he and Claire stood their ground. "We know what you're doing," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "And we won't let you get away with it." Claire's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "You think you can just bully me out of my own company? You're mistaken." Lila stepped closer, a predatory smile on her lips. "Oh, sweet Claire, you have no idea what you're up against. You should have stayed in your cushy little bubble." Just as Claire opened her mouth to retort, the lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into darkness for a brief moment. Panic erupted as guests scrambled, and in the chaos, Jack grabbed Claire's hand, pulling her through the crowd. "Let's get out of here," he urged, his voice urgent. As they rushed toward the exit, Claire's heart raced with fear and defiance. They had come too far to back down now, but just as they reached the parking garage, a shadow loomed behind them. Jack turned, instinctively placing himself between Claire and the threat. "Get away from her!" he shouted, adrenaline surging through him. But it was too late. A figure lunged at Claire, and Jack reacted on instinct, tackling the assailant to the ground. The two men wrestled in the dim light, while Claire stood frozen, her breath hitching in her throat. "Jack!" she cried out, panic rising within her. She grabbed her phone, ready to call for help, but the commotion left her momentarily paralyzed. With a burst of strength, Jack managed to shove the assailant away, scrambling to his feet. "Claire, are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with urgency. "I'm fine, but we need to go." She reached for his hand, and they sprinted toward the car, their hearts pounding in sync with the chaos behind them. As they reached the vehicle, Claire fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking. "Hurry!" she urged, glancing back toward the parking garage where shadows shifted ominously. Jack slid into the passenger seat, his eyes darting around as if expecting another attack. "Drive! We can't stay here," he urged. With a shaky breath, Claire turned the key in the ignition and the car roared to life. She pulled out of the garage, the city lights blurring as they sped away from the danger that lurked behind them. "What the hell just happened?" Jack finally breathed, turning to Claire, his expression a mix of concern and disbelief. "I don't know," Claire admitted, her heart still racing. "But we need to figure this out. We can't let them intimidate us. Not now." Jack nodded, the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "We'll find a way. Together." In that moment, Claire stood at the podium, her heart racing as she faced the sea of reporters and flashing cameras. The press conference was set in the grand atrium of her company's headquarters, a space that had once felt like a fortress of success but now seemed like a stage for a potentially devastating performance. The stakes were higher than ever, and she could feel Jack's presence beside her, a quiet strength that steadied her resolve. "Thank you all for being here," Claire began, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling in her mind. "Today we are here to uncover the truth behind the corruption that has threatened my company and its people." She glanced at Jack, who stood with his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes scanning the crowd. He hadn't wanted to be in the spotlight, but they both understood the importance of this moment. Jack took a deep breath, grounding himself in the reality of their situation. The weight of the past loomed over him, but it was overshadowed by the urgency of the present. His mind raced back to the days spent on the streets when survival meant keeping his head down and avoiding trouble. Now, standing next to Claire, he felt a flicker of hope, a chance to reclaim his narrative. As Claire continued, she detailed the intricate web of deceit that had been woven by her former partner and their rival company. What started as a simple investigation turned into something much larger than either of us anticipated, she said, her gaze unwavering. "We discovered that the sabotage was not just an attack on my business, but a betrayal that ran deep." The room buzzed with murmurs. Reporters leaned in, eager for every word, every detail. Claire paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. "And it is with great regret that I must reveal the name of the individual at the center of this conspiracy, Eric Thornton, my business partner." Gasps echoed through the audience, cameras clicking wildly as the news sunk in. Jack felt a surge of adrenaline. He had known Eric's name too well. The same man who had once offered Jack a lifeline in the form of a job, only to pull it away at the last moment. The memories flooded back. Eric's false promises, the way he had manipulated Jack's desperation, leaving him to fend for himself once again. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jack stepped forward slightly, catching Claire's eye. She nodded, encouraging him to share his perspective. "I may not have the credentials of a businessman, but I know betrayal when I see it," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Eric Thornton is not just a man of business. He's a man who exploits those who are vulnerable. I was one of those people, and I'm not ashamed to say that I've fought my way back to reclaim my story." The tension in the room shifted. Suddenly, they were not just two individuals fighting against a corrupt system, but a united front against injustice. Claire watched as Jack's words resonated with the audience. She felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. He had come so far from the man she had first met in the park, and now he was standing tall, reclaiming his dignity. A reporter raised a hand, breaking the silence. "What evidence do you have to support these claims?" Claire gestured to a large screen behind her, which flickered to life, displaying emails and documents that had been painstakingly gathered over the past weeks. "These communications reveal not only the plans to undermine my company, but also a disturbing connection between Eric and certain figures in the rival firm," she explained. Jack watched as the reporters took notes frantically, their eyes darting between Claire and the screen. He could feel the momentum building, the shift in the narrative. This was not just about Claire's business. It was about exposing a system that preyed on the vulnerable, a system that he had once been trapped in. As the press conference continued, Claire and Jack took questions, their partnership becoming evident to all. They balanced each other perfectly. Claire's sharp, business-minded responses complemented Jack's straightforward, heartfelt honesty. They were a team, forged in the fire of adversity, and together they were dismantling the facade that had threatened to destroy them. After the conference, the air outside felt electric. Claire and Jack emerged from the building, surrounded by reporters clamoring for more information. Claire felt a rush of adrenaline. For the first time in weeks, she felt in control. "We did it, Jack," she said, turning to him with a bright smile. "We actually did it." Jack grinned back, though his expression was tinged with a hint of concern. "Yeah, but this is just the beginning. Eric won't go down without a fight." Claire nodded, her smile fading slightly. "I know, but we have the truth on our side, and we can't let fear stop us now." They walked together through the bustling streets of New York, the weight of the day's events slowly lifting. They found a quiet cafe, the kind of place that felt like a world apart from the chaos outside. As they settled into a corner booth, Jack took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. "You know, I never thought I'd be sitting in a place like this, talking about exposing corporate corruption," he mused. Claire chuckled softly. "And I never imagined I'd be standing next to someone from the streets who would help me reclaim my company. Life is full of surprises." Their conversation meandered through a variety of topics, laughter spilling over the remnants of their serious discussion. "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" Claire asked, genuinely curious. Jack leaned back, contemplating his response. "I want to write. I've started drafting my book, the one I told you about. It's not just about my struggles, it's about what I've learned and how we can fight back against the system." Claire's eyes sparkled with encouragement. "That's incredible, Jack. You have a voice that needs to be heard. I can help you publish it once it's ready." "Really?" Jack felt a surge of disbelief. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course. We're in this together now, remember?" Claire replied, her tone light yet serious. "You saved my life, and I want to help you create yours." Their connection deepened over coffee, and for the first time, both of them felt a sense of possibility. They were no longer defined by their pasts. They had become allies in a fight for justice and redemption. As they finished their drinks, Jack looked out the window, the city bustling with activity. "You know, Claire, I used to think wealth was about money and status, but now I see it differently." Claire tilted her head, intrigued. "How so?" "It's about the connections we make and the impact we have on others. That's the real wealth," he said, his gaze steady. "And I think we're rich in that regard." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't agree more." As they left the cafe, they walked side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over the city, and for the first time in a long time, both Claire and Jack felt hopeful about the future.